In this presentation, we'll explain the concept of a class. The notion of a class relies on the principle of abstraction. The principle of abstraction is something very natural we rely on every day. Already as toddlers, we learn how to distinguish between non-living and living things, between cutlery and toys, between people and animals. Every day, we classify objects around us into concepts such as fork, spoon, block, wheel, pen, ball. When we categorize objects, we are able to make abstraction of individual properties and focus on essential common properties. For example, this collie looks very different from this fox terrier. Yet we understand that both are dogs. And while this animal also has a furry skin, 4 legs, a tail, ears, etc., we know it's a cat and not a dog. In computer terms, a concept that groups objects with similar characteristics is called a class. Likewise, in order to be able to handle the objects in the universe of an organization, these objects need to be categorized into concepts. So let's look at an example. At our university, there are lots of people around, and we are able to distinguish between employees, professors, and students. The class student will capture the concept of a student and define the characteristics of a student that are relevant for the university, and will abstract the characteristics that are irrelevant. More importantly, in defining the class student, we will define what distinguishes a student from any other person within or outside the university, namely that a student is registered for a study program at the university. People that are not registered will not belong to the class student. Another example is the concept of a study program. A university offers many study programs. The concept of study program refers to a collection of courses you can follow in order to obtain a degree. And when defining the class study program, we will define the notion of study program such that we understand what constitutes the difference between a study program and a random collection of courses. In UML, a class is represented as a rectangle with the name of the class inside it. Here you see two classes, the class student and the class study program. Each class represents a set of objects as explained before. The class student represents a set that contains all the individual students. And likewise, the class study program represents the set of study programs that contains all the different instances of study programs. When we are doing modeling, we actually can distinguish between two different levels. Level 0 is the instance or object level. There we find individual objects. For the class student, these are the individual students like Peter, Helen, Lisa, John. For the class study program, we find different study programs like the Bachelor of Law, the Bachelor of Business Economics, and so on. The upper level of abstraction, level 1, is the model or diagram level. There we find a definition of the classes like the class student or the class study program. Modeling is abstracting. It means that you make the transition from level 0 to level 1. You go from the instances to the definition of the concepts. On the other hand, when you want to validate a model, you have to do the reverse. So you will take the model and reason on an example. You will start from level 1 and you will try to illustrate this level 1 by finding a level 0 example that proves or disproves that your model is right. A class has two functions. On the one hand, the class will be the template or a model for a group of real-world objects that are similar. It defines a type of instances, and therefore we also call it an object type. This is called the intent of the class. It is a definition of the concept that defines class membership. In our example, a person is a student only if that person is subscribed for at least one study program at the KU Leuven. The template will capture characteristics that are relevant about the objects in the class. In the case of students at the university, their name, birth date, their home address, their email address are examples of features that are relevant for the concept of the student in the context of the university. The class definition will omit the irrelevant aspects. Irrelevant characteristics of students from the perspective of the university are the color of their hair, the color of their eyes, their height, their weight. At the same time, the class represents a collection of objects that conform to its intent. This is called the extent of the class. Notice that classes can represent both tangible and intangible objects. Students are, for example, tangible objects, while study programs are intangible objects. Both kinds of objects can be represented as classes in a UML class diagram.